What is it for? Walking alone, alone. What is it for? Walking alone. Must our paths ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, walking alone. What is it for? Singing alone, alone. What is it for? Singing alone. Must our songs ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, singing alone. What is it for? Laughing alone, alone. What is it for? Laughing alone. Must our joys ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, laughing alone. What is it for? Living alone, alone. What is it for? Living alone. Must our lives ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, living alone. Oh, living alone.
The first characteristic you might say that's really easy to notice about this song, especially in comparison to most of other of Swami Krishna's music, is that it doesn't really state answers. It's not trying to provide answers. It really asks only questions. What is it for, walking, singing, laughing, and living alone? And must our lives ever be like winds on the sea? That's the essence of, or must our lives, our paths, our songs, our joys ever be like the winds on the sea? Those are just the questions it poses. And with the minor key that the song is written in, it has somewhat of a melancholic mood. And in fact, if then you look only at the surface of the song rather than feeling its consciousness, which is what we're trying to get to, then you can very easily interpret these rhetorical questions and even the title of the song itself as some kind of statements of finality, statements of despair, leading even potentially to those suicidal thoughts of, oh, what's the point of it all? I might as well give up. You ask, what is it for? Well, it's pointless, so let's just relinquish life itself. But the song is not providing answers in that direct way. Instead, it's doing it in a number of subtle ways. So very first off is the question in the title. Again, what is it for? That can be interpreted as what is the point of life itself? But that's not actually the question being asked. The question in the lyrics is, what's the point, my friend, of trying to face life alone? That's the question. What's the point of cutting yourself off from the wondrous reality that's all around you? And that very small but very important detail is what takes that hopelessness and that despair and turns it around into statements of possibility, into statements of hope, that once you can qualify it to say, what is it for being alone, you've opened yourself automatically to the possibility that there's something greater there. And next we then have the question, must our paths or songs or joys or lives ever be like winds on the sea? The imagery here is interesting, that winds on the sea are what you might say are scattered and rather pointless, because out on the open sea, they don't really do anything useful except whip up waves, and generally speaking, with the oceans as large as they are, nobody's even around to notice that they're whipping up those waves. So they're kind of scattered, pointless energies is the imagery that's being given there. So this question then isn't really a cry of despair, must our lives ever be like winds on the sea? Oh, it's pointless. It's rather challenging the selfish heart in a way to say, it's saying, friend, is this really the way you want to live? Do you want to rot in smallness and isolation always? And can't you see that the problem here is that you've separated yourself from a greater reality? That's the question that we're really trying to press. And then the challenge then implies the answer to seek and connect yourself to a greater reality as the solution to these various problems of isolation and hopelessness and so forth. Now, whether you want to call that greater reality God or not, it doesn't matter. The greater reality doesn't even need to be a cosmic thing, because any kind of self-expansion beyond the ego is a helpful direction, even if it's just a little bit. Even a meaningful relationship with one other individual can be very helpful here. And in this way, then, the song is really trying to invite us constantly to a state of higher self-expansion, right? And even the guitar strumming, if you've listened to it, it's kind of got this initial strumming and the interstitial strumming between the verses that it ends with a moment of silence, gives a pause, as if to heighten that feeling of separation, before then resuming this rhetorical questioning that gets us to kind of ask, what is it for being alone? I don't really know if I like that. So now another key is in that word hour, in those lines of must our paths and songs so forth be like winds on the sea. This hour, it's plural, right? It's indicating that this question is not something we're asking as an individual, but something we're asking as a community, right? As a group of people. So the song is subtly saying then, we're in this together, you and I. Let's join our energies, let's focus them as opposed to the scattered winds, so we can then share our paths and share our songs and share our joys and share our lives. And then we're not so alone any longer. We've answered that question, what is it for being alone? And that's the thought that helps us magnetize the sense of communities rather than those feelings of loneliness and isolation. Again, two of the emotions for which this song serves as an antidote. Now, walking paths, singing songs, laughing joys, living lives, all of these couplings, you might say, really represent different activities in which we can engage in our lives. It's referring to physical activities and intellectual activities. The singing of songs, I think, implies talking and speaking and communicating and even other intellectual and mental work. And singing songs is a very poetic way of saying that. If we just said talking thoughts or talking ideas, that wouldn't come out in a song very well. So singing songs kind of represents that intellectual side of our lives. We have the emotional sides in laughing joys and songs as well. And then we also have the spiritual and existential side of things in the living of lives. So we have all of these things together saying, whatever you do in any kind of activity on any level, try to do it in the outward sense with people of like mind. And that's what helps, again, serve as an antidote for the isolation, or you might call isolationism, that belief that you should be isolated. And even then the quality of callousness, which is that, just being really insensitive to the needs of others, including your own self. And then here, the song is serving in the same way as an antidote for what I would say is a fear of friendship, that fear of opening yourself to the possibility that other people actually matter to you. And then in that, it's also that sense of egotism, which is the general idea of, well, it's all about me, it's about number one, and that's the only person I have to care about. Now, when you play this song, as we will at the end of today's session with the choral version that has harmonies, we further reinforce that idea of community as opposed to it being sung as a solo. And these harmonies then underscore what you might say, the invitation that's implied in that word hour. The invitation that's not a command, saying, you have to change, but it's saying, we're really here, friend, to help you. But can't you see that we can't help you at all unless you take that first step? Not to ask that question, what's the point of it all, but to ask yourself, why am I shutting myself off from other people? What am I afraid of? You want to ask yourself, what's the point of aloneness? And the song is saying, friend, there's no value there. Seek out your paths, seek out your joys and your life and friendship above all with the divine friend. Not just friendship with other people, but the friendship of your higher self within. And that's really to say that for as much as there's this outward message of community in the song, there's the inward message of communion and communion with the higher self. In this way, the community, you might say, is the whole spine, all of the different spinal centers, which then also includes all our aspects of body, mind, and feeling and spirit, going back to those activities in the outward sense. It also has that inward sense. And Ananda writes in day 8 of Secrets of Emotional Healing, to which he assigned the song, that the secret of overcoming loneliness is to develop the company of inner friends, creative thoughts, high ideals, and noble aspirations. Visualize your mind as a nation, he says, and its thought population as happy, self-motivated citizens. Now, if we take a closer look at the lyrics too, we see that the verses actually address the different centers in the spine in a way, progressing up the spine, asking in a way each of those chakras, what's your purpose of being alone? Is being alone really the right thing? What's your purpose without a connection to your own inherent divinity or nobility, those inner friends? And what's the point of not having a connection to God, which is implying that connection to the top of the spine at the spiritual line, even you could say the crown chakra at the top of the head. So if we look at the different verses, you have, what is it for? Walking paths. So this implies the physical body, which relates to primarily the lower 3 chakras. And paths also imply activity in the world, those actions that you take in the world to fulfill your dharma, or at least, to work off whatever karmic burdens you have. Then we have the second verse, singing and songs, which implies both emotions in the heart and the voice, which is clearly related to the throat chakra and communications and so forth. So we have both of those chakras being involved here. And our songs, our ideas, our inspirations, our thoughts, all of those things, it's saying again, are very meaningless without that connection to a greater reality. This is the same theme, by the way, that was in That Night When Christ Was Born that we talked about last December, where, what's no song did he sing, that's the words in the Nightingale, no song did he sing till that night when Christ was born, that night when the Christ consciousness or the inner God awoke in him to higher consciousness, and then his songs, then his notes, then all our ideas, inspirations, and thoughts and our songs have meaning in that way. The third verse then for laughing and joys implies, again, emotions in the heart chakra, but as well as, I think, the first forays into self-expansion, getting up into the throat chakra. Emotional joys, as we're taught in yoga, are inevitably mixed with sorrows. If we allow ourselves to get emotionally excited, sorrow will come. And those ups and downs, those feel like they just throttle us around unless, again, we connect them to a greater reality. And then we can see that they're teachers for us, that they are trying to help us see that there's some greater reality that we can commune with inwardly and see purpose and see a deeper inner joy above all of that emotional noise. And then we have living, which implies existence, right? And lives, implying again existence, but this is, at the medulla here, which is saying, what's the point of the lives and the living if it's bound by the little ego? Again, make that connection appear in self-expansion, expanding beyond the ego, and there will be much more meaning that we'll find. And so we've brought that progression kind of up the spine, at least to the medulla, and it's that tag at the very end, that, oh, living alone, which brings the energy finally here to the spiritual eye, inviting that release from the binding ego at the medulla, letting that all the energy of the spine flow upwards. And even the little bit of melancholic sense at the end of this song, like I said, it's not this bright, uplifting song providing answers. It's just pounding on this question, what is it for being alone? Even ending in this little bit of melancholy, but it does so here at the spiritual eye, where the wisdom of bringing your consciousness to that point will say, no, I don't want that. You end up, it's a repulsion of that particular thought of aloneness, of separation. And it's because you're having that kind of, what you might say, melancholic moment at the spiritual eye, it helps to overcome immediately those negative emotions of melancholy and self-preoccupation by applying the wisdom and understanding that the solution to these things is that connection with God, that connection up here to higher consciousness. Yogananda said, one of his clearest statements, I think, he said, the purpose of life is to find God, which is to say, to find that higher self within. And so that whole of the song, by saying, find that inner friend, connect to God within, answers that sense of purposelessness. If the purpose of life is to find God and you're missing that point, of course you will feel purposeless. You will feel hopeless as well. You'll be asking, so the song is asking, what's the point of living without God, without some connection to a greater reality? There is none. Because without God, your paths, your songs, your joys, and indeed every part of your life is scattered and pointless, as we've been saying. But with God, there's always purpose. There's always hope. And with God, you can see that then even human relationships and friendships and all of those things are a path to finding that divine friend within. You might remember that Yogananda also said that you don't imagine that you can win God's love without also winning the love of your fellow man. You can't win God if you're unkind to others. And that itself is a kind of a rhetorical statement because God's love is always there. And there's nothing, you might say, to really win. But what we need to do is open ourselves to that love, which is why then the love of other people becomes a mirror for us of how well that we are opening and how much we can improve that receptivity. So all in all then, what is it for here accomplishes its purpose not by providing an explicit answer, but by going into the consciousness of isolation in a real gentle and empathetic way, saying that, I understand how you feel. I understand this feeling of aloneness. We've all been there. But there's no need to feel guilty or ashamed for being alone. Just open yourself. And so by the time, by lifting the energy in the spine to the spiritual eye, the song doesn't need to tell you the answer to what is it for living alone. It puts you in the state of consciousness where the answer is really obvious, where you can see that, well, there isn't any point being alone. And it's in that thought, that one little thought, that you can open yourself to God, open yourself to meaningful friendships with others, including, perhaps of all, friendship with those teachers, to the guru, for example, that will then guide you forward on your spiritual journey. Sri Yukteswar said, make the acquaintance of God now. Make that acquaintance and then let everything else flow from that connection.
What is it for, walking alone, alone? What is it for, walking alone? Must our paths ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, walking alone. What is it for, singing alone, alone? What is it for, singing alone? Must our songs ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, singing alone. What is it for, laughing alone, alone? What is it for, laughing alone, laughing alone? Must our joys ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, laughing alone. What is it for, living alone, alone? What is it for, living alone, living alone? Must our lives ever be like the winds on the sea? Oh, living alone.